Hello, welcome to the evening. I can't believe we went through the morning and the afternoon, and we are now in the evening sessions of day one of the Culturally Competent Conversations for Equity and Belongingness Summit, the C3EB Summit. And this is going to be a very different session because, of course, we didn't want to give you the same kind of stuff over and over again. So not only is the topic different, but the format is going to be different too. And as you can tell, I am still energized and still wired and still going. But this is going to be a great conversation, and it is my absolute honor to bring to the C3EB Summit platform somebody that I have been on and off collaborating with in so many different ways for nearly a year now. And somebody whose opinions and perspectives I value so deeply, because this is somebody who really takes a whole person holistic approach to every thought and every action she makes in life. And that is something I truly appreciate about her. And I consider her one of my sisters. So it is my absolute honor to present to you and to shine the spotlight on one of my sisters, Ayanna Mann-Pope, today. And before I read the bio, I just want Ayanna to say hi. So hi, Ayanna.
Hey, AJ, how are you?
Good. I am so excited to shine the spotlight on you. And we're doing, we're experimenting with this video thing we're about to do, and it's going to be so exciting. So Ayanna and I actually have a new format for you. Ayanna's going to be here, but she pre-recorded the Q&A, she pre-recorded her presentation, which is a Q&A session, very candid Q&A session with her husband on healing inner trauma and intergenerational trauma. So we know the topic is going to be powerful. The format is going to be very intimate. So sit back and enjoy this presentation. But before we get into that, I do want to read Ayanna's bio. Ayanna Mann-Pope was born in the city of Detroit, Michigan. At 31 years old, Ayanna is the author of 2 books, both released in the year 2016. One, Living from Fullness, Acting Empty, The Perfect Love Story for the Bruised. And 2, The Beasts Hidden in the Beauty of Success, Meeting the Rose of Your Purpose, where she puts her pen to the paper as the spiritual counselor and a certified life coach. Through her company, Ascended Volition, L3C, Ayanna not only devotes herself as a healer and a coach, but as a creator who establishes platforms for individuals to function in their divine purpose, to carry out and finish those things to which each person has been called. One of the platforms that Ayanna has created through her company includes Silver Line Radio that she established in 2018, a Christian inspirational internet radio station that aims to help individuals along their journey through its various radio broadcasts and music. Bringing light, bringing life, bringing truth. Another platform established in 2020 is a Paradigm television network, which I have a TV show on, which is going to get restarted after this summit, created to help restore individuals and families worldwide through restored television. In addition to Ayanna Pope's accomplishments all of these accomplishments, in 2019, she debuted her first single as a Christian recording artist entitled The Cross Was Still There. Ayanna lives her life as a symbol of hope and light to all whom she serves, helping to ignite the fire within each to rise above all obstacles and be their best selves unapologetically. So with that, I am so blessed and proud to present this very candid pre-recorded question and answer session between Ayanna Pope and her husband, Terrence, who is one of our speakers and is going to be here tomorrow. Ayanna will be here to answer any audience questions after, but please sit back and enjoy this pre-recorded session.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Y'all, first want to thank y'all for joining us for our culturally competent conversations for equity and belonging. My name is
We are having audio issues, so let's retry that. I apologize for the inconvenience. I know exactly what I did wrong.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Y'all, first want to thank y'all for joining us for our culturally competent conversations for equity and belonging. My name is Terrence J. Pope, and today I have here with me my lovely wife, Miss Ayanna Pope.
Hello, everybody.
Yo, this woman is dope. She's amazing, and I'm not only saying that because she's my wife, because what she does in her everyday life, how she helps people, and just how involved she is in the community. I'm not going to say too much about her. I'm going to allow her to tell you a little bit about herself, but I am going to share with you that she's an author of 2 books. She is the owner and a founder of her business, Ascended Volition, and she's also a counselor. And did I mention she's my wife? But how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. Thank you all for having me today. I'm so excited to engage in this dialogue, much needed dialogue this evening. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we are excited to have you. I know that you have great ideas. I know that you're very bright. You're very smart.
He's making me blush on camera. Stop
that. So listen. That's what a man's supposed to do, right? But we're excited to have you today. And what are we discussing today?
Well, we are discussing today how important inner healing is and inner trauma, how it affects everyone, no matter what walk of life you are, no matter where you come from. Inner trauma happens to us all. And so in order for us to get the best out of our hand in life in this society, for this world to go around, we have to deal with that inner trauma.
Absolutely. I know that I have my own, I have experienced my own inner trauma, and I had my own experiences. So I'm excited to hear what you are going to talk about today, what I can take away and apply to my own life. So let's get started. Right. I do have here a few questions that I want to ask you.
Oh, boy.
So okay, you ready?
Yep.
Let's go. She ready. The first question, for those who don't know, may not have an idea of what trauma is or even what it looks like. I want to ask you, what is trauma?
Trauma, in a nutshell, is damage or injury to your psyche, that thing that we can't see, that affects us in ways that we can't even imagine, from stressful events, stressful times. I would even say when we're in distress or we're the most afraid. Some of those times are when we experience those traumatic times in our psyche that affects everything that we do or don't do in our life.
Absolutely. I mean, just you talking about that. I remember having childhood experiences where things will happen to me, and even now as I'm an adult and I face similar situations, I will notice that childhood experience will find its way in my present moment, and I will feel in my present moment what I have felt in my childhood. And I know that, and I noticed that those were some things that I hadn't dealt with.
Right.
So that's good.
But we all live in some form or fashion with that foundation of our childhood. And I mean, it's so cliche, but it's very true that how we see things has a lot to do with our upbringing. So
Absolutely.
we have to go back to that inner child.
Absolutely. Well, that's good. That's good. The second question that I have for you is, what is the relationship between trauma and having a fair chance at life?
Well, a person who has trauma versus a person who maybe doesn't have a form of trauma or doesn't know what that means, like the start is different, you know, because you see things from a different lens when you're injured, internally injured. You see things, it's a quote that says, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And so if you're coming from a corporation standpoint or just building a friendship, you know, our experiences are different. So when we approach life with the lens of injury or damage, as we spoke of for the definition of what trauma is, you might perceive things totally different from how a person may mean it. Yeah. You know, you're talking in two different books, it almost seems like, and fighting with totally different tools. You might not even have tools at all, based off of that upbringing and the things that we've experienced along our path up to this very moment.
Yeah.
So it correlates in that way. The relationship between trauma and our chance at life is the lens that we're looking out of and what we feel that we have or don't have to work with to conquer that thing that's before us.
So it's fair to say that we will first have to change the way we see things.
Yeah.
We first have to deal with that trauma and just change our whole perspective. Because I know people now, even family members, who had I will say something to them out of the best interest of my heart, and they were taking it in a whole nother way, and they will always feel like, yo, you're coming at me, or are you trying to damage me? And I'm like, yo, that's not even my intention. You know, I'm just trying to give you some advice that will help you. But sometimes they would feel like, yo, you're coming at me. Or you're trying to destroy me, and like we talked about earlier, that may stem from old childhood traumas and things like that. So,
or even beyond our own traumas, things that have been given to us. But I guess we'll talk about that a little bit later. But definitely, it has a lot to do with that. The totally different dynamic and conversations, and we talk about just between me and you, or between friends, but it's a whole different, you know, thing when you're talking about races. You know, our experiences as cultures are different. You know, so I think about the things that we see on TV now, you know, the root of those things. We have totally different experiences, totally different ways of communicating. Yeah. So,
you know what, it brings me to a scenario that I just experienced the other day. I was in the gym, and a guy that I know, he came into the gym. He was working out, and I went over there and I began to talk to him, and he said, and I asked him, how do we like the gym? He was new there. He was like, man, they are racist. And I was like, that's a big statement. Yeah. Like, you only been here for about 5 minutes. But I think because the perspective, especially the time that we're in now, that we're in a sensitive time, and we're very heightened right now. So any bad thing that looks bad, or that you may be perceiving bad, you know, you just call it as what you think it is. And that's because of a tainted perspective.
And not exactly what it is.
That's good.
That's unfortunate though.
Next question. What are some obvious signs that can let people know that they have experienced trauma and they need to seek help?
There are so many different ways to identify trauma. One thing may be kind of along the lines of what we talked about, but responding to something not based off of what actually happened, but responding based off of our triggers. You know, it's a touchy spot within us, and so rather responding to the thing that's before us, we're responding to what's going on within us, the trouble that's within us, or completely disassociating yourself from people, not liking to be amongst crowds. You know, to be honest, we all have our traumas. mine was, I didn't like to be around a lot of people for whatever reason, being a loner. There's nothing wrong with doing things alone, but we all need community. We need, the opportunities to, iron sharpens iron. I don't know if you all have heard that, but without that community, we can't do that. The sense of being numb to life. You don't know if you're happy or sad. You're just here, just a walking being, because you've taught yourself in your subconscious mind not to feel. Yeah. Or you won't speak up. You won't say something. You may have a great idea, but you won't put it out there because maybe you were shut down before. Maybe you were taught, if you say something else, whatever's going to happen. So you've taught yourself, you made an inner vow to yourself that I'm not going to do this again. So these are just traumas that we can't see. We can't see, but we live with them every day, and we function and live our lives that way, unfulfilled.
That's good. That's good. You on fire, girl. You're hot over here. That was good. That was good. Our next question is, what is the difference between inner trauma and intergenerational trauma?
Okay, I would say that inner trauma has a lot to do with our reality, things that have happened to us, our experiences, our responses to life based off of what we've experienced. I'll say it that way. Yeah. Intergenerational is more so us responding to life based off of somebody else's experience. Yeah. And how I can maybe say, I know you're my husband. So what was something that your mom was afraid of?
My mom was afraid of cats.
Okay. Now, going back up to this point, are you afraid of cats?
I'm terrified of cats.
Why?
I don't like them.
Why are you afraid of cats? What did that cat do to you?
You got a point. My mom, nothing.
How was her response when you saw her?
My mom was afraid of cats. So what happened was, as I got older, it rubbed off on me. And I don't have no reason to be afraid of cats. But anytime I see a cat or it gets close, I cringe up, and I have a fear of cats.
So that's something that is more so considered intergenerational, because that cat has nothing to do with you. But based off of your mom's expression, your mom's experience, that taught you that a cat is a bad thing. Stay away from that thing.
That's good.
So that's intergenerational, whereas, we're going to get into your story later, but your own experience being in a wheelchair, certain things may trigger you because of what caused you to be in this chair. So that's the difference. Yeah. Inner trauma is what happened to you. Your response to life based off of what happened to you, and intergenerational is what you're taught.
So it's how can I word that? It is basically a primary experience and a secondary experience, So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'm gonna write that down so I can steal that later. The next question that we have is, how can someone inner trauma become intergenerational trauma?
That's a good question. It's interesting because this happens all the time, especially in the Black community. Yeah. Getting counseling or therapy is not as popular. It's just starting to become more popular or a thing to do than maybe another culture. Not getting healed from your trauma, you pass your traumas down, you pass your wounds down to your child. Yeah. And so they learn to function in toxic ways. Yeah. Ways that are not, it's not fit. It's toxic. So if you don't heal yourself first, you're going to reteach your wounds to the next one, and you're going to find yourself in this cycle.
Yeah, I remember. Just a little bit about myself. Speaking on this topic, like my father was a very angry man, and he never dealt with that. So what happened was that we grew up watching him and what he was exposing us to. And we began to take on that same aggression, began to learn how to act off impulse, to do the first thing that came to my mind, to say the first thing that came to my mind. And had he went through the healing process, he could have showed us and exposed us to something different, but because he didn't do that, we were exposed to it, and it trickled down, and so that was good.
That's great. And so it takes somebody to break that pattern and step out of that line to get the therapy, to get the counseling, whatever that help is to get you on the right track.
Yeah. So as you know, like even with you being my wife, you know that I go through the therapy, and because I want to change that break that chain of that we call it the generational curse. Break that chain. That way I don't take his habits and how he treated my mother and how he treated us and pass it down, and I treat you the same way, and I'm treating my son the same way, but I took the initiative to do something different than what he had done. So that was.
I commend you. It really takes, like I said, this therapy and counseling and things like that deals with the inner trauma is just becoming something that is, I don't want to say popular, but it's something that we in the Black community are starting to do. And maybe in other cultures it may be more known, in other cultures not so much, because dealing with things inside the home is hush hush, quiet. Don't talk to other people about it, and so we just evolve. Our wounds evolve.
So it's not socially popular, but I think counseling, therapy is like the best decision that we can make, especially as a Black community. I went into it with an open mind. I didn't really care about the stigma, as much, because my problem was bigger than the stigma, and I knew that if I don't go through this process, then I will continue the process and continue to pass it on and continue to inflict pain on people that I love. And I was telling my wife not too long ago that if you never deal with the person who never deal with the affliction becomes the afflictor. So I knew that I didn't want what I didn't want to be the man that my father was. I knew that I wanted to be a greater father. I knew that I wanted to be a greater husband. So I knew that I had to do what was necessary to accomplish that and manifest that in my life.
And that's so great, because you're talking about just relationally, but even people who want opportunities, you sacrifice so much more by not getting healed.
Absolutely.
For me, I had emotional trauma, and my process in transition was so, like, from this end to here, I had a whole nother life that I never would have thought that I would have been able to begin walking into, had I not went through my process of healing certain traumas that made me maybe think I could not, or I did not have what I needed to make certain decisions so you sacrifice so much more when you choose not to go through the process of healing.
And it's not an easy thing. Like, reconditioning your mind, digging a different hole and walking a different path it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're accustomed to only one way. You have seen things one way, you have this narrow perspective, and then you try to break out of that and go a different route. It's not an easy thing to do. It wasn't easy for me. I'm sure it wasn't easy for you, but we knew that it was necessary. And I think that we both held on to the hope and the understanding that there has to be more. That I don't want to be like this. I don't want to take the path that my mother, my father, sisters, whoever has taken it. I want to change. I want to change the narrative of my story and be better. So.
I'm thinking of this quote, and I can't remember it word for word, but you're good with quotes. Maybe you know it, but it speaks about basically we stay in the same place until the weight of change. Something about the weight of change. Basically, when we change I can't remember.
No,
but basically, the weight of staying the same is heavier than that weight of just changing, going through that process. I already talked about the sacrifice of your whole life. Sometimes this whole life that's much better than the life that you're living right now. The weight of staying the same, going in the same cycle of pain. Toxic. When you're tired of that weight, then you're ready to say, okay, I'm ready for the weight of change. Basically, that's the justice of it. And that's where I came to when I decided, okay, I'm going to go this route now, because this is too much over here.
And this is good because, I promise we're going to move on to the next question. But it reminds me, you saying that reminds me of a story that I heard not too long ago, that a guy was walking past a lady's house, and he heard a dog on a porch howling and crying. And he was like, tell that dog to shut up. What is wrong with it? And she was like, he's sitting on a nail. And she was like, well, why won't he get? He said, well, why won't he get up? She was like, it don't hurt bad enough.
Wow.
You know, and I think that, you know, sometimes that we have, like she said, we have to get tired. That sometimes that just have to hurt bad enough. For you, just piggyback to what I just said earlier, that I knew that me carrying that weight was more important than the stigma and how and people judge me on getting counseling and therapy and things like that. So,
that's good.
Yeah. So
I gotta put that in my mindset. So
I'm still at trademarking that. All right, so we're going to go to the next question. What kind of practices can a person do to help themselves through their trauma, whether it is inner or intergenerational?
The first thing that came to my mind when you said that, when you began to ask the question, was one, the state and condition that we are in right now. Everything's pushing themselves on us through media. The TV is pushed on us, where you have to sit there and watch it, and it affects how you feel, it affects how you think, it truly affects you. So one of the things that you can do is so small, but turn off the TV. Turn off the TV so that you won't become the hate that you see. So you don't become, you know, this monster, you know. Turn off the TV, go outside, get some air, breathe, meditate.
Absolutely.
Meditate. Say something nice to yourself. You know, we have to sometimes go back and deal with our child, our inner child first. Color, paint. You know, get back in touch with your inner child. Figure out, you know, if your youth was a hard, you know, time in your life, then learn what that child would have liked. What would have interested that child. So just little things like that make a big difference in you know, just going through our process of trauma and getting healing, and just being able to manage once we do find ourselves at that place of functioning and being healed, to just maintain ourselves. Just because you're better doesn't mean stop doing all the things that got you there. When you get to that place, continue to care for yourself. Just that's what counseling is. That's what therapy is. It doesn't mean that something is wrong with you, but sometimes you just want to maintain. That's the same thing that we do, and that's why you date your husband, you date your wife. You want to maintain what is good.
Very, very great answer. Very great answer. Our next question is, as a counselor, how can a person who has experienced trauma find their way to becoming involved in life?
You know, a lot of the people that I counsel, we have a tendency as people to think that the things that we go through, the things that we've done, the things that we've seen, sometimes disqualifies us, makes us exempt from being able to not just take on life, but things that are right along the line of what we experienced. And I would say to that person who has experienced trauma, don't count out or discredit your experiences, because you could very well be called to take on that very thing. Not everybody, not everybody is called to the thing that they've been through.
Yeah.
But sometimes you could very well be called to the thing that you've been through. So you have to, of course, go through the process of facing your trauma, facing your experience. Go back. We already talked about the childhood, and refilling that thing, refilling that time that you went through, and dealing with that inner child, dealing with that person that, you know, who knows what age that you were, but dealing with that, and then becoming bold enough to consider, maybe this is exactly what I'm called to. Wow. Maybe I'm here to, you know, maybe you were raped, maybe you were whatever, but maybe I'm called to speak to young women who have experienced this same kind of trauma. Maybe I'm here to talk to, you know, who knows what your group of people may be, but consider that you could very well be called to that same wound that you experienced. Wow. So we just have to be bold enough and open-minded enough to think that, hey, this doesn't disqualify me just because I went through this. But, you know, if you're a person of faith, you know, things can come back around on the right side.
Wow.
So
you know what? That reminds me of a quote by two quotes. One by Tony Robbins. He said, "What if life didn't happen to you, but it happened for you?"
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, even with my story that we'll get into in my segment, but just hearing that and then understanding what I've been through and what has happened to me in my life and how it propelled me to greater, you know, and even Dean Vygotsky in his book, The Underdog Advantage, he says, what if what happened to you was not meant to be your anchor, but actually the wind to sail your ship? You know, so you just saying that, you know, it's just it's amazing. It resonates with me. I'm sure it resonates with you, and I'm sure it resonates with so many people who are out there who are running businesses. The lady who had cancer started the cancer organization, or the guy who has dealt with trauma or whatever they have dealt with in life, and they started businesses, and now they're out there and they're doing what they're supposed to do and what they're called to do, just because of what they probably had perceived in the beginning as a mishap, but it turned out to be the or obstacle, but it turned out to be the steps that carried them into their destiny.
Absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes the only way to it is through it. You got to go through the process to get to where you're called to be, where you're supposed to be.
That's good. That's good. Last question. I'm a little down about this question because that means that we're almost done. I'm really enjoying you. I'm enjoying just your perspective, your ideas, how you see things it's really inspiring. So the last question here, we're gonna try to drag this question so we can keep her a little bit longer. No, but the last question here is, what is the first step that all of us can afford to take to acknowledge and make sense of trauma and its impact?
Having a little compassion for one. I would say we can all afford to be a little bit more compassionate, patient, and understanding that we all have our traumas in some way, shape, form, or another. And we're not as different as we think we are from the next person. You know, if we truly sat down at the table and we're humble enough to have a conversation, leaving our entitlements at home, keeping our egos at home, I think we'll get so much further in this where we are right now in this time if we were just able to do that, to sit down and have those uncomfortable conversations. And if you can't have it with a person you don't know, have it with a person that you do know that doesn't look like you, and see life through their lens, see where they hurt. We have to be, you know, we have to be brave enough and humble enough at the same time to show each other our wounds. Because if we're all acting like we're not hurt, if we're all acting like, you know, we're soldiers out here and nobody's ever gotten hurt or has been afraid before, we're not going to get to that place that we want to be. And that's why we're here today, because we need to sit down and show each other our wounds, to relate to one another, to see one another for who we are, and to just put on that other lens for a second.
That's good. That's good. Well, Miss Pope, this has been an amazing dialogue. You know, we really appreciate you. I'm just going to take what I've learned here today, and I'm pretty sure that they are too. We really appreciate you guys for tuning in with us and hanging out here with your family. Until next time, is there anything you'd like to say, Miss Ayanna Pope?
No, just nope.
And that's it. All right, family. We love y'all. All right. Y'all have a blessed
one. Well, I have to say, you really got me with the passing on intergenerational trauma thing.
Yeah, it's real. It's more real than we know. Yep.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, once you said it, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But my husband and I are both combat veterans. So while the environment is not the same, it does make me wonder what you know, we may or may not possibly, you know, and then in addition to that, I would say our more civilian traumas, right? So it's certainly something that's tumbling around in my mind right now. And I'm like, ooh, teletherapy. We're gonna have to do some teletherapy now.
Listen, just as long as it's known that it's nothing wrong with therapy, there's nothing wrong with it. And I think the biggest misconception that I had to come to just in my walk, my process, is that going to therapy doesn't mean that something's wrong with you or that you're crazy. It just means that you're human and that you feel things and that you've experienced things. If you really think about how much information that we receive on a daily basis, where do you think that we put all that information? We put it in us. And so at some point we have to take out the trash or
Right.
it's going to start thinking. Our thinking is going to start thinking. The way that we see things and people is going to start thinking. So all counseling is and all therapy is just getting rid of the trash so you can move when it's time to move.
Absolutely. I guess you could almost liken it to the way, you know, the food that you eat, right?
Yeah.
If it's good going in, then should be fine coming out. But I mean, the worse you eat, then you might have some troubles. You got to go to the doctor for that, right?
Absolutely.
But yes, that was a
Yeah.
really interesting format, and it was really nice to see your other half. I always hated the phrase better half, right? But
No, I'm not a big fan of that either. You know, it's something
yeah,
about
so
it.
your other half, your complementary half. And so that was wonderful. And I know that his session is tomorrow, correct?
Yes, it is.
And that will be wonderful. So just thank you so much for being a part of this and all the support for this C3EV Summit experience. And you definitely got the chat going. So that's very exciting. So be sure to check that out. And for those of you who are watching this live, be sure to check out some of the other sessions that we've got this evening, possibly over your dinner. And then be sure to tune in for day 2 tomorrow. And we will see you then. Ayanna, thanks again for being here.
Thank you for having me. Take care.